The bank employee called on a Friday afternoon. Not the loan officer we had been working with for 3 months, not the branch manager, but a woman named Helen from the Fraud Compliance Division, whose title alone told me, before she said a single additional word, that the call I was receiving was not the kind of call you receive when everything is going according to plan. She said, carefully, "Mrs. Harmon, I'm calling about the business loan application currently under review for Harmon Interiors. Specifically, about a set of amended documents submitted on your behalf last Tuesday. I want to ask you directly whether you authorized any changes to the financial disclosure section of your application after the initial submission." I was sitting at my desk in our home studio. Fabric samples on one side, client mood boards on the other, the organized, comfortable chaos of a design business that had taken 6 years to build to the point where a $250,000 business expansion loan was something we were actually positioned to apply for. And I said, very carefully, "Helen, I submitted that application on March 4th. I have not submitted any amendments. I have not authorized any changes. What changes are you describing?" There was a pause. "Mrs. Harmon," she said, "the amended documents significantly overstated your current client receivables and modified 2 years of revenue figures in ways that constitute material misrepresentation. The amendments were submitted digitally, through your client portal account, from an IP address that is not your registered device." I sat very still. "Helen," I said, "whose IP address was it?" Before I tell you what she told me and what the digital access logs revealed about who had logged into my portal account and when, tell me, where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know. And I want to be clear before we continue. This is a work of fiction, written for entertainment. The names, the people, the events. None of it is real, and any resemblance to anyone living is entirely coincidental. My name is Nora Harmon. I'm 32 years old, and for 6 years I have been building Harmon Interiors, a residential and small commercial interior design firm that I started in the spare bedroom of our first apartment with a laptop, a design software subscription, and the particular stubborn conviction that I was good enough at this to make it work without anyone else's permission or funding. My husband, David, was an architect, which meant we operated in adjacent worlds, and it made our partnership, both personally and professionally, the most functional thing I had ever been part of. He handled the structural and spatial work. I handled the interiors. We referred clients to each other constantly and, over 6 years, had built something that was genuinely and measurably successful. The expansion loan was for a studio space, a real one, not a spare bedroom, not a corner of the dining table, but an actual dedicated studio with a client meeting room and a materials library and the capacity to take on the kind of commercial projects I had been turning down for 2 years because I didn't have the infrastructure to support them. David's best friend, Connor. 34 years old, charming, the kind of person who had been the most popular person in every room he'd ever entered and had organized his entire adult life around maintaining that position. Had known about the loan application from the beginning. He and David talked constantly, the way men who have been close friends since they were 17 years old sometimes still do. And David had mentioned the application in the natural course of conversation, with the uncomplicated openness of someone who had never had a reason to be guarded with this particular person. Connor worked in financial consulting. He had, in fact, helped David review the initial loan application documents before submission. A favor, offered casually, framed as expertise. We had been grateful. I was considerably less grateful at the moment Helen from Fraud Compliance finished her sentence. The access logs were provided by the bank's digital security team within 72 hours of my formal fraud report. A clean, time-stamped record of every login to our client portal in the 60 days surrounding the application, showing device type, IP address, and session duration. My logins were clustered around the initial submission, identifiable, consistent from our home network. There was one additional login, 8 days after our initial submission, from a different IP address. Session duration, 41 minutes. Activity: amendment to the financial disclosure section, modification of revenue figures across 2 fiscal years, and upload of revised documentation. The IP address, resolved through the standard subpoena process Sandra Perkins initiated the same day I retained her, points to a commercial office building in downtown Charlotte. The specific suite registered to that IP address was the office of a financial consulting firm, Connor's firm. Sandra's investigator confirmed it within a week. Not just the IP address, but a digital fingerprint in the amended document's metadata that showed the files had been created and modified on a device registered to Connor's business account before being uploaded through our portal using login credentials Connor had apparently retained from the session when he helped David review the original documents. He had not, apparently, logged out of our portal during that review session. Or he had, and had noted the credentials before doing so. The investigation did not establish which, but it established unambiguously that the amended documents had originated from his office. The question of why, the one David asked, sitting at our kitchen table the night we confirmed it, in the specific quiet of someone whose understanding of a 14-year friendship was reorganizing itself around a new and permanent fact, took slightly longer to answer. The answer, when it came, was both simpler and more depressing than either of us had expected. Connor had a competing loan application under review at the same bank, a business expansion of his own, for which he and the bank's loan pool were apparently in competition with our application for a limited allocation of small business lending capital that the branch had available in that fiscal quarter. He had, apparently, calculated that a fraudulent amendment that triggered a fraud review on our application would delay or disqualify it from that allocation cycle, giving his own application a clear run at the funds. He had not considered, or had considered and discounted, the possibility that the bank's fraud compliance division would trace the amendment. Helen from Fraud Compliance had been doing her job for 11 years. She had traced it in 4 days. Connor was charged with bank fraud, computer access fraud, and filing false financial documents. He pleaded not guilty initially, his attorney arguing that the IP address and metadata evidence was circumstantial. And then, 6 weeks before trial, changed his plea when Sandra's team produced a confirmation email sent from Connor's personal email address to his own business account. 3 days before the amendment, containing a draft of the modified financial figures with the subject line, revised numbers. Use these. He had emailed himself the plan, in writing, with a subject line. Sandra presented this to me with the particular expression of someone who has been doing this long enough to find certain things more remarkable than others. Connor pleaded guilty to a consolidated fraud charge. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution for legal fees and the costs associated with the delayed loan application process. The loan was ultimately approved on the original, accurate figures, which were, as Helen confirmed during the fraud investigation, entirely sufficient for approval without any amendment at all. The studio opened 4 months later. 15-foot ceilings. A materials library along the entire south wall. A client meeting room with the specific quality of afternoon light I had been looking for since I started the business. David and Connor have not spoken since the plea. Do you think 3 years was an appropriate sentence for deliberately sabotaging a friend's business loan? Or should the 14-year friendship have factored into a harsher consequence? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the Family Ledger for a brand new story every single day. Hit that bell. You do not want to miss what is coming next.